without LeBron, Lakers are struggling.
Let me tell you about the team I hate, all right? I know the Dallas Cowboy fan is here, so I had to make sure he knew how much I hate this team.
I'm ready.
I've often said that the people who run baseball, they try very hard to ruin it.
I'm from Brooklyn. I don't have a problem saying it to his face. Oh, I'm from Brooklyn. Hey, get any...
This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
What's up, everybody? We have a brand new sports show coming to you. We're going to call it Coast to Coast. What that means is that we got people from all over the country that are going to be talking about us. I'm going to be your host, Philly sports guy, Tags, and I'm there with Bo over there on the other side. Everybody knows him from the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast. We're going to have McLovin. He's going to be showing up here on 3 days a week. He's going to bring us from the South side on Texas. You know, those Cowboy fans, they can only do a little bit of time because they whatever they got going on. But anyways, we're going to be bringing you this new show. It's going to be a 5-day-a-week show. 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. That means you're going to be hearing us a lot.
There's no doubt.
So, you know what I mean? I mean, we've had a little bit of things happen already for the first show, but it's, we're going and we're kicking on all cylinders here. So, welcome.
Yeah, no, this is going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. And of course, it wouldn't be a first show if there weren't some hiccups to get rolling, right?
Exactly. So, Bo, you know what? Obviously, a lot of my listeners have no idea who you are. So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, and then I could do the same for your listeners.
Yeah, so for me, when it comes to football, I played football until I was 30, so I played pro arena ball. And then, in the semi-pro ranks, I won a national championship. So football is my first love for sure. But, talk about all sports. And then, of course, I went through normal career paths after that and, wanted to find my way back to what I love to do. And here we are chatting on Roku about sports. It's the best.
Awesome. So what team did you play on and what league? Was it the Arena 1, Arena 2?
So it was in the AIFA. It was for the Ogden Knights. And then in semi-pro, I played for the Ravens here in the Washington area.
Okay. All right. So, awesome. Good to hear. And what position?
I was a corner. I was out one that people thought I was going to be slow because I'm a white kid, and I ran a 4.34. So you had to want to try and get by me.
Well, hey, I understand that, but that's the reason why you didn't make it to the NFL, because I don't think they have any white corners at all in the NFL.
I wasn't durable enough to get there.
I can imagine. I mean, when I played football, that's the position I played. I played corner because I wasn't very fast, but I had closing speed, and I was able to knock the ball out of people's hands. So that was the one thing that I was really good at. And sometimes, I could catch the ball, but I wasn't fast enough, and I didn't know how to run the routes well enough to be on offense, so they put me on defense. Plus, I like to hit people sometimes. So, that's
how I made the switch.
Exactly. I didn't mind getting hits, but I'd rather hit somebody. But and for your listeners, I mean, I'm the Philly sports guy. You see me all over social media, typically a little bit more colorful than this. For these shows, I try to go incognito a little bit, but I am definitely one of those guys that likes to get very into the games, very excited, and I do a lot of social media content and such. So I go and I have, like it says, I would say football is probably my most talked about sports, but I love all the sports, going from football, hockey, baseball, basketball, soccer. We could even talk about cornhole and things of that nature. So there's a lot to be said and a lot going on there. So
I'm not sure I can talk about that without a beer in my hand. Like cornhole and beer, I feel like is, they go together.
Yeah, and you would be right most of the time, but I tell you, the professional cornhole league, there was some beer involved for the people in the crowd, but it was not. It was actually a very competitive league, and they're going to get back started up again. It was something that did get a little bit of traction, and then had to pull out because some of the teams just weren't doing their due diligence. So ultimately, I'm sure we'll see that back again because I'm surprised a lot of people love watching cornhole. Like even on ESPN and Fox Sports. I mean, it's one of those sports that you kind of feel, I guess you can kind of root for the local dad. It's like watching curling when we saw the Americans winning curling. They looked like four guys that had like 12 kids between them, and it was just doing their thing and winning gold. So it feels like anybody can do that.
Those guys look like everybody you've ever had watching football in their basement. Like that.
That's exactly correct.
I mean, the curling team. Yeah.
That's exactly correct. So let's get started about talking about sports. And knowing that you're from Seattle, I am going to start with this right out of the gate. I didn't get to watch any of the game. I was sick as a dog yesterday, so I spent the day in bed. But I was following it on my sports app. And hey, listen, if you guys want to sponsor us, we'd be more than happy for you to do that. But I was watching it via my sports app, and I was so happy to watch that Washington was able to come up and win this game versus Texas. I didn't think Texas even deserved to be there. However, they did show a little bit of a showing yesterday. It was a really close game. I'm sure you watched every snap of that ball. So why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so I mean, it was funny the level of disrespect the Huskies were getting from the media going into this game, right? They don't have a chance. This is a home game for Texas, which, I mean, they're not wrong. It was down there, but even going into it, if you looked at any of the sports apps, I think it was on ESPN, they started the game and they had, it was 0-0, right? They had the Longhorns as a 60, I think it was like a 65 or 66%, win percentage. Huskies score first. They still had the Longhorns as like a 20% win. I'm like, how are you behind and favored to win? This makes no sense. But then, there were obviously mistakes on both sides. The Huskies had a muffed punt where they were moving the ball well. They got a stop on D. They muff a punt. Longhorns immediately score, tie the game up. So you worried a little bit about maybe a momentum shift there because that was their opportunity to take it back down and, really punch them in the mouth. But, that defense came up huge right at the end of the game. They had 20 seconds left from the 12, and they were able to shut them down, turnover on downs. So kudos to that Washington defense to stand up at the right time, get the win. And now they get to face Michigan for the Natty. So, I mean,
it's so interesting to hear that they stopped them on defense, because the one thing that you would always hear about the Pac-10 or the Pac-12, whatever they call it out there, the now defunct Pac whatever, no defense, all offense, no defense. So the fact that it was a defensive stand to end the game is actually something that gives me a little bit of hope, because the other winner of that, the other side of that, Michigan was able to outlast Alabama. And not that I'm ever happy, not that I'm ever crying about the fact that Alabama lost. However, I would have preferred Alabama to beat Michigan, because I am definitely a Michigan hater. I don't pay attention to college sports at all, but I will tell you that I am not a fan of Notre Dame. I am not a fan of Ohio State. I am not a fan of Michigan. So those three specifically I'm a hater on. Then I go into being a hater on Alabama. I don't mind Georgia because we have a lot of their players on our team. But other than that, I mean, I'm not a college guy. But like I said, Michigan, I think, has a little bit of a scare. This was a scary game for them. They to go to overtime, I got to imagine, was a big deal for them in total. And I
mean, they're lucky they made it to overtime. That Alabama was leading coming down the stretch there, so they were able to tie it up to get to overtime. So kudos to them for finishing the game off, right? Coming out with the win. But I mean, with a few minutes to go in the fourth, it looked like Alabama was going to pull it off.
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess and Harbaugh was able to coach this game, correct? He was actually there on the sidelines. So this was the first game back in a little while. So maybe having their having him be there gave them a little bit of extra momentum. But even then, you get a little bit of rust, because he wasn't there all that time. So there may have been some things that were a little different that had occurred between the other games. Because, it seems like they've had some cakewalks to get to this point. It just was, I know, beating Ohio State's always a big thing for them. And, it's one of those games where I wish they could both lose, but unfortunately, it didn't happen that way. And not that I'm even a Penn State supporter. I could care less about Penn State either. It's not like the big deal, but I would much prefer my state, Pennsylvania, to win over Ohio or Michigan. And unfortunately, they just don't do that for some reason. Franklin just can't seem to beat those guys. But yeah, you're right. It's possible that we could see Harbaugh in the pros here. You never know. My thought is that there's plenty of coaching vacancies available that he should be able to get a pretty big offer, and he's going to get a lot of money. I can imagine he's going to get a lot of money to either stay in Michigan or go wherever he's going to go. So, but we're going to see.
I was going to say it's funny with Harbaugh because Michigan did offer him an extension. From what I was reading, and one of the stipulations to it is he can't entertain any pro offers this offseason. But I'm curious, I would imagine what the NCAA does moving forward probably impacts what his decision is going to be huge, because he will, they're talking about potentially having him suspended the entirety of next season. So do you want to come back for something like that? Especially if you happen to win. Say he wins the title. I think you absolutely move on. But if you come up a game short, do you try and run it back? He loses half his team to the draft this next year. So I don't know. I could definitely see him going on to the pros, though.
Yeah, I kind of think that. I got to imagine that there's a little bit of brotherly rivalry there too, since he's watching his brother do so well with the Ravens and already have won a couple of rings, including beating him one time. Where it was the first time that was the first real brother versus brother in the Super Bowl. I mean, the Kelce's got to do it last year, but realistically, they were the second set of brothers to really do that. And I got to imagine that especially if he was to win the national championship or even lose the national championship, just getting there, you got to feel like, you know what? I made it to the promised land all the way with San Francisco, and we didn't do it. I think I can take another run at that and really go forward, especially if they pull like a Chip Kelly, where Chip Kelly was going to get suspended for the entire year. And he's like, you know what? That Eagles job looks great now. You know what I mean? Because that's exactly how that occurred. He was like, I'm going to stay with Oregon. You're going to suspend me all year? Guess what? I'll go to Philadelphia. Here I come. And of course he did, only so well here. He did good for the first season, okay for the second season, and then had to get kicked out for the third season. So
he had a little too much power. But to be honest, Pete Carroll went that same route, right? Like he was going to have some sanctions coming at him in SC, and so he comes up to Seattle, and obviously he wins a ring there. But Chip Kelly was an interesting.
Right, but Pete Carroll made a foray here. He came into the NFL, didn't do so well.
He did.
Then went back to college, and ultimately, let's think about this. If the NIL was in existence back when Pete Carroll was in college, he may never have left college. And the NIL, I feel like the NIL is done. Was originally started up to be able to level the playing field away from some of these coaches that are perennial winners. When you see. Alabama's coach or Georgia's coach or even LSU's coach for a little while before he started to flake out. You know what I mean? Ultimately, those guys were always getting the players and nobody else could really compete. And then even with Ohio State, and then you saw what happened over there in Jacksonville. That was just a train wreck of a position. So I fully expect that you're going to see a number of college coaches has come out here, and you're going to see a new group of college coaches really start to take hold here. Like I expect Dion now with the NIL on his side, he's going to start to really be able to recruit some of the players that were never, would never have considered Colorado, but now will because Dion's there.
Yeah, it gives them the most opportunity to make money in college for sure. It also makes it gives them another recruiting class that otherwise you didn't have before the NLL, right? Like you had 6 or 7 top schools that were going to be in that conversation every year, and then everybody else was just kind of, you're probably going to get a bowl game, and it's going to be the Pop-Tart Bowl or something where you're just like, what? Why is that a thing? Like,
I remember watching that game. I'm like, are you kidding me? They made it a Pop-Tart Bowl. It was like the Frosted Flakes, but now it's the Tony the Tiger Bowl. You know what I mean? It's like, come on, this is what we're dealing with. But that's what it is. It's all advertisement. They're all trying to, give money. If they're going to give millions of dollars to these schools, they want to make sure that the advertisement's there. So there we have the Pop-Tart Bowl.
I can't fault them for it. It's just these bowl games are getting ridiculous, right? Like, I don't mind the ones that have like a good heritage to them, lots of tradition, whatever, right? And that's fine. But when you're getting into these ones where they're making up a new name every other year, and it's a 6-6 against an 8-5 or something, you're just like, I mean,
hey, there was a team that was 5-7, and I'm like, I thought you had to win 6 games to get into a bowl. Well, they won the game, by the way. But it was 5-7. And I was like,
how are they eligible? Like, that doesn't make sense. Did somebody decline going?
Maybe. I have no idea.
It was probably actually a school that was supposed to go in that had some sort of sanction that kept them out of the playoffs or something weird.
That could very well be. But I remember saying, I'm like, 5-7. I thought you needed at least 6 wins to get in. This is why I don't pay too much attention to college football. Like he says, it's obviously these players are all going to wind up in the NFL, whoever's supposed to make it, and everybody else is going to be, kind of figuring out what they got to do with the rest of their lives. But, ultimately, I just don't look at it the same way as I look at it as the NFL, which, we might as well switch over to that side since both of us were crying this week. I'm going to start with you and what your thoughts were on the fact that I thought that you guys were going to be able to take care of the Steelers, and you didn't.
Yeah, that's an understatement. I don't know that they would have been able to beat anybody the way they were trying to tackle people. I'm not sure what happened with Seattle as far as being able to tackle, right? They used to be one of the best tackling teams in the league. In fact, they had a promo video cut back in 13-14 that was how to teach people how to tackle. The problem with that is the coaching staff, like, part of them are still there. So it's not like this is new people and they just didn't know. Like, this is still Pete Carroll and his guys, the same ones that cut the video. I feel like maybe they need to go back to that video archive and figure out how to coach people how to tackle again, because, man, it is really frustrating. Now, they still have a path to get to the playoffs. So it's not like the door was slammed shut. It becomes significantly harder now. But, the biggest thing about that game was the fact that they just weren't tackling anybody. And that is I don't know how you coach through that at this point in the season.
Well, I understand. Well, because we had a very similar situation occur where our defense decided to just not show up at all. It was horrendous. The fact that we had a team that you're probably a little bit more, accustomed to, the Arizona Cardinals, who, I understand that Gannon is, it's his first year, and truth of the matter is that if I was an Philadelphia Eagle, I would have had this game circled more than any other game, because there's no chance that I want the guy who was really the catalyst in losing the Super Bowl to be the one that beats us, and put a mark, especially this late in the season when things are not necessarily going the best for us. Yeah. So this was a way for us to kind of get ourselves back on track, get ready for the playoffs, and do what we needed to do. And we did not. We did not. To give up 35 points. They didn't have one punt. Not one punt. We couldn't stop them at all. Like the pick six was the change of 14 points. Or else this game would have gone 42. Like, it was just a bad game on us. It was a bad offensively called game. It was a bad defensively called game. I'm surprised that we haven't heard more from the coaching staff in terms of how poorly everything kind of came for this game. And it's, you could blame Nick Sirianni can do an Andy Reid and say, yeah, this is all on me. This is all on me. Well, yes, it is all on you. You wanted to make him feel uncomfortable, and everybody was uncomfortable. Every fan in that stadium was uncomfortable because you decided to call plays the way you did, and your defenses couldn't stop anything from happening. It was just literally they just walked down the field every drive, and it was a mess. It was ugly, and it was a mess.
Well, so the thing that's interesting about the Eagles to me is on paper, they should have been able to roll right from where they were last year, right? On their defense, they lose some players. They basically bring in the Georgia national championship team to fill in the holes. And then you have most of your same guys on offense. And for some reason, that offense just isn't quite the same. And the defense, we'll say, has been wildly inconsistent. But I mean, the thing is they haven't looked comfortable all year. And even though their record looks great, they've backed into a lot of those wins, right? Like they weren't good wins. They were, we got to catch at the end of the game. And don't get me wrong, you got to win games that way. But none of the games look like how you thought they were going to look coming into this season. So it's interesting, watching them, especially coming down the stretch here as they're starting to drop some games where some of those things just aren't quite going their way. It's going to be interesting on this coaching staff to see how they kind of ratchet this up, because you're in the playoffs. So, I mean, that's not the issue. It's how do you prevent yourself from being one and done?
Well, and not only that, like you were able to set yourself up to possibly have 2, maybe even 3 home playoff games if, things rolled the right way with, the number 1 seed. And the fact that they didn't, the fact that they've given this away, and really they've given away the division, because Dallas is going up against Washington. There's no chance, even though I will say, I feel like Dallas was given a tremendous gift. They were given a tremendous gift at the end of that game. Everybody in the world watched that Saturday game, and you could say whatever it wants, that he didn't report, he did report, whatever. That was a great play. They won that game fair and square, I felt like, and I felt like that it was the referees got involved. And now, you know what? Those referees aren't even able to go and do a playoff game now because of that. They got downgraded out of the playoffs.
And they should, because when you watch the video, you watch that player go up to the ref. Why? Like, you're not going up there to be like, hi, like you're going up to report. There's no other reason for that guy to walk up to the ref. So,
and not only that, didn't he announce it? I mean, they announce it every the referee goes, hey, number 68 is an eligible receiver. Right. And they so he had to have announced that. I understand there's a lot going on with that, with not a lot of time. It's a 2-point conversion. You got nothing but time. The clock is stopped. So you have nothing but time to do that. So the referees, to make that bad of a mistake, really, and ultimately probably cost Detroit their number 2 seed in the process of this. It was a big loss in a grand scheme of things for that to occur.
Well, and of course, Dan Campbell came out and said that he even went over this particular play with the refs before the game even started. So they knew it was coming. And then, that's a huge drop for the Lions, because they would have been the number 2 seed. It's unfortunate. It probably is going to cost me my Pick'em championship because I picked the Lions in that game. So I don't appreciate those refs at all. They should have been downgraded.
Right. But on top of that, though, once you've made that play happen, and then you get the 5-yard penalty, at that point, you have to revert back to the kick. I think that you have to kick the extra point there and bring it to overtime. That you played your hand, it worked, but now you're getting beat up a little bit. You have to do what's best for your team, and I feel that he chose his ego over the team on once they made that penalty. Now, once you get that second penalty, then you get it back within 2 years. If he even completed that pass, he was not making it in. You know what I mean? Just the way that whole play kind of developed, he wasn't going to get that 2-point conversion, which was a shame. But that being said, ultimately, I felt that you should have gone to overtime there and taken your chances. Obviously, your defense was playing a good game. Even if you tied that game, even if you guys tied that game, that means that you'd have been there in the second seed. And ultimately you would not have Dallas get over top of you if the Eagles were to lose, and they did. You know what I mean? They gave them that on a silver platter too, because we were the number 2 seed dead to rights, and now Dallas is the number 2 seed. So ultimately the Eagles gave up a terrible opportunity because they were given a gift. I mean, ultimately they were given the gift, but I feel the coaching could have done a better job with that in total. So, but that's not, that's why they pay them the big bucks and we just get to talk about it. So, yes. And ultimately, I got up here your scenarios here on how Seattle makes it to the playoffs, and you guys are becoming very big Chicago Bears fans this week.
Yes.
You guys are, you need Chicago to beat Green Bay. And ultimately that's it.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be helpful if the Lions took care of business against the Vikings too, because there are some scenarios where if they both lose, I thought I was reading one where there's actually a scenario where they could lose and still get in, but maybe not now. There was last week, like it was one of those where had they won and then Green Bay and the Vikings tied, they were in.
Right. That could have very well be. I mean, right now I have it as this is your scenario here. Seattle win, Green Bay loss or tie, or Seattle tie, a Green Bay loss and Tampa Bay loss or tie, or Seattle tie, Green Bay loss, New Orleans loss. So don't tie with Arizona, and then you won't have to worry about those. Just win your game, and then you only have to worry about Green Bay.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Arizona, even though their record doesn't show it, that's a scrappy team. Like they've come to play every week. A couple weeks ago, they kind of let one go, or they just fell apart. But I mean, they've really battled. I got to give a lot of credit to the resiliency of a team that has nothing to play for. So, and of course, that'll be a divisional game, so they're going to come trying to wreck playoff hopes.
Well, I can imagine. So ultimately, I mean, that's the one good thing Gannon's good at. He's wrecking playoff hopes because he lost us the Super Bowl, straight out there. And now he's also screwed us a little bit in the number 2 seed specifically. I know that the 49ers were all excited about it, but now the 49ers get to rest. And do whatever thing they do, anything that they need to do. They don't need to put out their starting quarterback out there, which is I would not, especially since he's a little beat up. And it may wind up costing him the MVP, but that's okay because, he's getting paid less than, the backup quarterback of Texas did, so through the NIL. That being said, and ultimately you want to make sure that he's ready for the playoffs, even though you're going to get that 1 week bye. Now he's going to have 2 weeks to get himself together and stuff like that. And, I kind of feel like you're going to sit McCaffrey. You don't want him to get injured in a game that's not important. And same thing with Ayuk and, also Deebo Samuel. My expectation is that a lot of them will get very limited to no playing time at all, along with, Trent Williams, you got to want to make sure is ready to go for, you don't want that guy getting hurt because that's your whole offensive line, really. So,
for real. Yeah.
That all being said, in our case, I even mentioned personally that I think the Eagles should also rest all their players. There's no sense in trying to go and try to win this game to try to get the division and in the hopes that Dallas loses, or trying to get yourself hurt. You've got these guys that are a little beat up. Rest them. Get yourselves together. Start putting it together. This is your bye week now against the Giants. Who cares if the Giants beat you? They never beat you for real, so it doesn't matter. Let them actually win this game and move forward and get yourself back together again to get go on a playoff run. Because truth of the matter is that everybody's 0-0 in the playoffs, and this team on paper still shows a lot. is it coaching? Is it the players responding to the coaches? I can't speak intelligently on really what's going on. I know that it is a mess. It is a mess, and that we really miss Steichen. And Steichen has actually done a great job for the Colts, this year, and they are also in the playoff hunt. I might as well go over all the playoff scenarios for all the teams, since we are coast to coast. We're not just talking about the Seahawks and the Eagles.
Absolutely.
Obviously, the Ravens have in the AFC. The Ravens have the number 1 seed and home field advantage throughout. At the moment, the number 2 seed belongs to the Cleveland Browns. How interesting that is, that the Cleveland Browns have the number 2 seed. They could lose it to the Chiefs if there was a win-loss type of thing there. But ultimately, it's the Browns got the number 2 seed. The Dolphins have the number 3 seed, but still haven't even won their division yet. This game on Sunday night, of course, they made this the Sunday night game. The
As they
Bills,
should.
exactly. That's the only game that really will go up for a division. The
Absolutely.
Bills versus.
Yeah, that's going to be a battle.
And interestingly enough, the Bills with a loss could be out of the playoffs.
Yeah.
So they're not in the playoffs yet.
No, I mean this is for everything for them, which is crazy.
Yeah, they either win the division and in the playoffs, or a loss and they're out, really, because everybody else is going to jump over top of them because of the losses that they've had up to this point.
Yep. Yeah, they don't have the tiebreakers, so I mean they have to win it.
And the first team that they show here on the midst of all this is the Houston Texans. And I have to give a big shout out to them as well. Like, talk about coming out of nowhere. This guy is, coach. He was the defensive coordinator for the 49ers last year, comes in as a coach. They get the number 2 and the number 3 pick, and they choose a quarterback on defense and a quarterback on offense.
Yep.
And literally go to town. Thank God that the Carolina Panthers can't pick quarterbacks, and ultimately they wind up choosing the wrong guy. And next thing you know, the Texans go from one of the worst teams in the league and one of the worst franchises of all time to possibly winning the AFC South. So
yeah, I mean it's definitely possible. I don't think they quite get there this year, but I mean, they're ahead of schedule. I'll give them that. It's the Texans have been really good after that draft. I thought they were going to need one more year to really be competitive, but man, they've definitely shown out.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because the Jaguars are in a similar situation to Buffalo. If the Jaguars lose to Tennessee, which I don't expect that they will, but you never know. I mean, the Jaguars have had Tennessee's number for the last 6 years. I don't think Tennessee has won a game against Jacksonville during that time. But that being said, or they may have beaten them this year. I don't even know. I don't pay that close of attention. But if they were to lose this game and Pittsburgh loses or Pittsburgh wins, Jacksonville's out. So it's interesting to see how the Colts could win. It could be, in theory, 2 teams from what was supposed to be one of the worst divisions in football in the AFC South could wind up the Colts, or Houston or Jacksonville all make it to the playoffs there.
Yeah.
I remember when they used to think that the AFC West was like the best division in football, and now they can, the Chiefs may not even win the division. So, or did they win the division already? I guess they did. They did win the division.
They locked it.
Yeah, because every other team lost. They didn't. Didn't they lose that game and still won the division?
Yeah, pretty much.
It was horrible.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, but you're also looking at a division where half of their coaches are getting fired this year. So, I mean.
Oh, yes. Thank you. The Browns can't be the number 2 seed. Thank you. I appreciate that, buddy.
Oh, yeah.
Because the Ravens are the number 1 seed. They can't get the number 2 seed. But it'll be interesting. It'd be interesting to see. I kind of thought for a moment there that it was going to be all 4 teams from the AFC North that could win that game, get a playoff.
I mean, it's going to happen at some point.
Yeah.
Where all 4 teams come in.
Yeah, it could have happened last year had Washington did their job for the NFC East, but obviously they didn't. We wound up with three of the four teams. And truth of the matter, I think that's what's really going to happen most of the time. You're going to see these teams, three out of four are going to start to make them. Realistically, I like it when there's two teams in each division that really are battling it out for the top spot. Because same thing. I mean, if Aaron Rodgers didn't get hurt, would it have
Yeah.
been possible for him to bring the Jets back up to, would it be a battle, a three-way battle for the division here between Buffalo and Miami and the Jets?
Oh, there's
You
no
never
doubt.
know.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, because so many of those games were close enough that you're like, oh, if there was just competent quarterback play, they probably could have won that game, right? And they had the same problem last year. Like Wilson was the problem with that team. So if Aaron Rodgers doesn't get hurt, do I think that they are in the mix for the playoffs? Of course. Do I think they just win the division or anything? No. I mean, we saw his last year in Green Bay. That wasn't anything special either. So it's not like he was on that I'm going to win another MVP trajectory. He just is significantly better than Wilson.
Right. So, and then lastly, the last group on this list is the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I said this year at the very beginning of the year that I thought that the Pittsburgh Steelers were going to have their first year where they were not going to go above 500 for Tomlin. And I tell you, with as much mystery as he's had at the quarterback position, which is a shame for him because ultimately he's a quarterback away from being really a Super Bowl contender again. That defense is really stout. His coaching, I don't think he's a great coach, but he is a fantastic motivator and he's a very good delegator. And I think that realistically, that's what a NFL coach should be good at. So ultimately, as much as I say he's not a good coach, and I'm going ahead and saying that, there's really nobody better at it. So maybe I'm the idiot there for saying that. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, ultimately, he is one of the best coaches in the NFL, and even though I'm not a fan of his,
sure,
guy gets it done every year. So, and I can imagine that there's a lot of teams that would love to have him there, and that's why Pittsburgh is always, they have only had four coaches in the last 50 years, 60 years. They just choose right and, they do well. So, and they have a lot of different ways that they can get in, but I'm sorry.
Yeah. They're funny because they're a team that the defense carried them, right? Because that offense wasn't doing anything all season. So, that defense is elite. If they had a good quarterback, I agree with you. I think they would be probably a a Super Bowl caliber team for sure. But if they do, for whatever reason, move on from Tomlin, there's two teams that are going to call him almost immediately in the Panthers and the Commanders because those ownership groups were part of the Pittsburgh Steelers ownership group previously. So those are ones where they have a relationship with Tomlin already. So I would imagine if for whatever reason they decided, hey, we want to move on. What are your trade options? What kind of picks are you going to give us for them and whatever? That those two teams be the first ones pick the phone up.
I can imagine. I can absolutely imagine. And so there's so many different scenarios. A lot of them have to deal with Pittsburgh winning. There is one that's, says, hey, if they tie, they could do it, but ultimately there's not enough ties in football. I don't think there was any ties this year at all, right? Nobody tied this year in football. So,
I don't remember. I don't remember if anybody tied this year.
I
feel like there had to be one.
No, I don't think so. Not this year.
Crazy.
At least, which is good because realistically, these games shouldn't end in tie. They have an interesting matchup against the Ravens this week. So it'll be interesting to see what actually occurs, how the Ravens go at this game. Because I'll be honest, if I was the Ravens, I think I'd want Pittsburgh in it. Why not have, if you have Pittsburgh win and, like I said, they can take over for Jacksonville or for Buffalo or even for Houston. Do you want those scrappy teams in? Do you want to be able to possibly go up against one of those teams? it's bad enough that if everybody holds serve, that you're going up against the Browns, a team that does know you pretty well and has the good enough defense to be able to stop Lamar Jackson.
Yeah. Well, and Flacco's played well, right? Like, he hasn't looked as washed as he did in New York. So you have to think that, it was less of him being just completely done with his career and more that the Jets just ruined quarterbacks.
I look at it. I look at it more in the terms of that he didn't play, so he's only played like 4 games, so he's rested. You know what I mean? Ultimately, that he's gotten the rest, and that he hasn't needed to really do much. You know what I mean? The defense is really good over there. They have a Super Bowl style defense with the Browns, and
that's his whole career. His whole career, he was fine if he didn't have to do too much. Like, he's that guy where everybody says he's a game manager. And, I look at a game manager a little different than, like, for whatever reason, everybody puts a negative connotation on that. I want a game manager. I want a guy that doesn't turn the ball over. I don't need you to play hero ball. Like, it's the worst thing about a Josh Allen or a Brett Favre. You're going to go as far as their arm carries you, right? Like, they're exciting to watch. Love to watch them. So much fun. They don't win a lot of rings, though, right? Because eventually you're going to make a mistake and the rest of your team can't pick it up. And so if you have a game manager, you end up with guys like Trent Dilfer that wins a ring because he just didn't throw the game away, right? They had an elite defense. They had a running game. They had enough weapons. And Trent Dilfer just didn't make mistakes. You get a ring out of that. It's a reason.
It also helps. It also helps when you have somebody like they did on defense on the other side who could absolutely change the way a game was played.
Without a doubt.
Yeah,
but what I mean is there's a lot more game managers with rings than guys that go out and play hero ball. Right. And so even though everybody's like, oh, like Cam Newton, right? He's like, oh, he's not a difference maker and whatever. It's like, okay, well, but the thing is a lot of those difference makers didn't end up with rings. Sometimes they made it to the Super Bowl and then they don't jump on a fumble.
Right.
Exactly.
That was terrible. I mean, that ruined his career. That absolutely ruined his career when he looked at that ball and it was afraid to go in and get involved in it. Yeah, that was way, and that's what occurs. That's why you didn't win a ring. That's why you were 15-1 and won all the way to the Super Bowl and didn't win. Yep. But ultimately,
and then from the other side, you look at Brady, most rings ever. He's not an athletic dude, right? Like, he's not that quote unquote difference maker. He is here, incredibly smart. Peyton Manning as well, right? But those guys weren't out there tearing off long runs or, beating you with insane arm talent or anything like that, right? Like, half the league can throw further than Brady could. So I mean, yeah, I'll take a game manager. Like, whether you want to call it make it sound bad. It's like, yeah, they don't lose you a lot of games. It's why guys like Jimmy G has a really good win percentage. Do I think he's a good quarterback? No.
Right.
But he still wins most of his games because the rest of the team is good and he doesn't always make a mistake.
Well, and that's what makes me wonder if the Browns still, if their quarterback was healthy, would they be in the same position? Because I feel like their quarterback makes mistakes enough for them to lose. That he was part of the reason why they lost a couple of games rather than be the reason why they've won a few games. And
I mean,
a big deal.
No, I totally agree with you. Deshaun is, they spent a lot of money hoping he would be what he was with the Texans, and he's not. Like, he's not that guy. And it's something that I've said on other shows. It's like, I don't know about you, but I've never gotten better at something that I just didn't do for 2 years. Right. So, I mean, he just hasn't played good football. And then the one game he finally started to look good. You were just like, okay, this is a good game. Here we go. He gets hurt at the end, done for the year. Right.
Yep.
So now he's going to miss a bunch more starts. Obviously, they're married to him because they gave him a fully guaranteed contract, and they're, it's just too bad for them. But which let's be honest, was the most Browns thing to do ever. But I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, his quality of play and the fact that he hadn't played in so long, like it seemed insane to me to offer that kind of money in the hopes that maybe he's good again. And do I think he can play better than he has? Sure. But you couldn't ask for much better of a team to be on, and he hasn't played great, right? Like he has weapons around him. He had a good enough running attack. The defense is elite. Like, I don't know how much more you could ask for. So, you know, to your point, yeah, there's some games they lost because of Deshaun.
Well, and not only that, but think about the capology that they had to do to work in the number the way that he played it, because obviously he only made $1 million in the 1 year he didn't play, you know, and then he's got all of that money, and they've got that defense kind of stacked up the way that they do, and all these other players that fit into the cap. Ultimately, that cap is going to remain the same, but you're going to see those players on defense go somewhere else because they're not going to be able to get paid the way they want to get paid in Cleveland. So you're going to see them start to spread throughout the league, and Cleveland's not going to have that same type of elite defense that they have this year. So it'd be interesting to see if they can, you know, it wouldn't be the biggest surprise to me to see a AFC championship game of the Ravens versus the Browns. And ultimately, if the Browns were able to make it to the Super Bowl, and, you know, I think if the Browns make it to the Super Bowl, there's no way that they're going to beat the Niners. I feel like that the Ravens may be the right team to go up against the Niners. And the Ravens are clicking on all cylinders right now. You know, so you put 56 points up against, you know, the Dolphins, who really, you know, they were a shell of their team. They had so many people that were hurt for that game specific. And then, but also to dismantle the Niners the way that they did. And like I said, the Niners have been playing some really strong ball. And obviously they just, they didn't have the right game plan. And I feel like that when it comes to games like that, the Niners got all the talent in the world, you know, and ultimately I suspect that they are going to be the team that represents the NFC this year. It'll be interesting to see the Dallas Cowboy Niners NFC championship game if it makes it to that, but ultimately
I don't think that's going to be there.
Well, so I like the fact that Dallas is playing it. Dallas, I think that Dallas would make it because they're playing at home up to that point. Now that they're the number 2 seed, because that's what that 2-point conversion cost Detroit, and now the Eagles losing through that in the mix.
Yeah. So here's the thing, and it's not that I'm a Cowboy hater per se, but you got to show me something, right? And so far over the last, you can say 20 years, they haven't won a lot of games in December, January, right? But say the last 2, right? We have the same coaching regime. They went 13-3 in the last couple of years. And then they back into the playoffs and they're out, right? Well, now we're playing with basically the exact same team they had last year. And, we end up with 2 losses to start December, right? And then they barely get a win that maybe probably shouldn't have been a win, right? And you're telling me you think they're going to win 3 games in January? Man, I have a hard time believing that, to then make it to the Super Bowl. Now, my preseason pick for the Super Bowl was Ravens-Eagles. Now, I think the Ravens can get there. The Eagles got to figure some stuff out because, man, it doesn't look like anybody really has a shot in the NFC to beat the Niners when they're healthy.
Correct. I agree with that. I think that even if the Eagles were to start pulling rabbits out of their hat, you know what I mean? Ultimately, that's what's got to occur here. They really have to start to figure out things in a monstrous way. And right now they don't have it. They just do not have it. And I think that they've lost confidence. I feel like the team. So I was hearing some stuff last week where they were saying that there was some dissension in the ranks in the locker room. And I feel like that what that really comes out as is that they have lost confidence in their coaching. That it's that there's not really dissension in the ranks. It's just that they don't believe that the coach has their best thought forward, best foot forward here, and they are making poor decisions. When you do, you know, I they just the play calling on offense has been atrocious, atrocious. There's been a couple plays where there was one play specifically where the ball went right through Devonta Smith's hands. You never see him you never see him have those problems, but yet, it went right through his hands, and he knew it. He knew it. It was a great throw. It would have been a great catch, and ultimately would have started a drive in a different way. In the meantime, we had the punt. You know what I mean? Because that didn't happen. And there were a number of plays that were similar to that. And ultimately, the referees have done a lot to keep the flags in their pocket, except when it matters too much. That's I feel like that they oh no, that's not a penalty. Oh, that's not a penalty. That's not a penalty. That's not a penalty. Oh, we're gonna call a penalty now when we haven't called it all game long.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is so ridiculous that they are doing that. And unfortunately, it just is what it is. You don't blame the referees. You can't blame the referees. You got to be able to make plays on your own and do these things properly.
Yeah, I agree with you mostly, right? Like you should never have a game so close that the call matters, right? Like go beat a team. That being said, there has to be consistency from the refs. Like if you're going to call something, call it all game, because then as a player, you can adjust to it. You'd be like, okay, they're calling it this way today. Cool. Like, I don't even care if you're necessarily consistent game to game. Like, it'd be better if you were, obviously. But say you have one where it's illegal contact, right? That one's always subjective. Depends on your refs on the field. And some of them will let you hand check and beat each other up down the field. Awesome. And some of them won't. Again, awesome. As long as you set that precedent at the beginning so you know how to play all day, it's fine. But if you want to allow, this hand checking going down the field, and then when it really matters, you're like, oh, PI, you're like, well, like, where was that for the last 50 minutes? Because I wouldn't have done that in that scenario had I known that was going to be, DPI all day. Right. So, I mean, it's just kind of, that's what I want to see out of these refs. Like, I don't care if there's a little bit of variation between ref crews, but let's at least call it the same way all day.
Right. No, and I agree with that. And I feel like that there's got to be a restructuring of the way the refs call games as a unit specifically. I feel that there are certain things that aren't getting called right now that absolutely need to get called. And I keep saying that there should be the eye in the sky ref anymore. You know what I mean? When there is a blatant pull, like when you're holding on to a jersey, everything else I can kind of go with. You're hand checking each other and you're smacking each other. But when you're pulling on a jersey, that should be pass interference at the very least, or a holding call. Let's change maybe the rule a little bit and say, all right, that this is a pass interference with a 15-yard, not a spot foul. You know what I
Sure.
mean? Like that there can be those types of calls where it's like, okay, it's a personal foul, pass interference, and it's only a 15-yard penalty, so that you don't have to get like a 50-yard penalty that was just called on something like that. But the last two games specifically, I've seen where an Eagles wide receiver has had their jersey, including with Seattle. They had a game where they were pulling on the jersey and no flag. And it's like, you can't, that is blatant pass interference. It is blatant pass interference. Now,
well, I mean,
they didn't call it. It is what it is. But again,
so to be fair in that game, though, Seattle's the most penalized team in the league. Like, sometimes they just want to see the clock get to zeros. So they're like, we can't throw a flag every down.
Yeah, but you also can't have it be so blatant and not call it. So and ultimately, hey, listen, when it came to that game specifically, the defense, it gave up all of those yards, 92 yards, to a backup quarterback who decided to play for the first time in maybe his career. He played great for 2 minutes, and he won the game. And there's nothing that can be said about that. You know what I mean? Had the defense played better, they wouldn't have gotten that far down the field. 92 yards in less than 2 minutes time. Drew Lock looked like he was Joe Montana.
Well, and that was such a huge defensive blunder for you guys, because it's a scenario where the Seahawks have some of the fastest receivers in the league, right? You got DK and JSN, both incredibly fast, right? So you're telling me with a 2 minute drive, right? You got the entire field. You're going to run a single high safety with some of the fastest receivers in the league, right? Like, this is the top 1% of 1% of 1%, right? So you're telling me you're going to go with a single high, a play design that you've already been burned on multiple times that day, right? DK got you on it earlier in the day. So this is what we're dialing up on a 2 minute, or like, this is where you do blanket coverage, right? You drop the high safeties, you fade back your corners, you let them get stuff underneath, and you make sure they don't get outside. You make sure the clock's running out. Like, it made no sense for them to call the defense they did that got that touchdown. Now, as a Hawks fan, I appreciate it. But when you look at it from a football perspective, you're like, that was 100% the wrong call. And you saw it as they were lining up. You're just like, oh, they're like, this is terrible. What are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know what? It reminds me a little bit of watching that Miami Jets game where he's like, I bet you if they call a single high safety here that, we're going to have a 1-play drive. And they did it. And he's like, ha, 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 you know what I mean? And there it was, a 1-play drive for a touchdown. And ultimately, same type of situation there. It's and it cost Desai his job. And then we went with Matt Patricia, who decided that he can't coach football anymore either. It was just such a that
was Patricia for that game. That was his first game, if I remember right. So I was like, oh,
no, I thought it was it might have been because it was the Giants. I thought that really was his first game, but that was the one where they brought Desai out on Wednesday, but they really made the decision on Tuesday to let him go or to keep him as a consultant. But ultimately, neither one of these guys, because there's way too much talent on the defense. Way too much talent on the defense. We have, we picked up an all-pro safety, in the middle of the season to be able to, he's gonna shore up some things. And I know Maddox being hurt was a blow a little bit and stuff like that, but ultimately, and you couldn't rely on him really last week because he's just getting his legs back under him. He's not back up to NFL speed yet. So they just too much talent to be in these games the way that they are, which is really sad. That's the hard part about this. So ultimately, things are, I don't know. I think that they are a little grim for the Eagles and that they may get through the number one, the first playoff game, because anybody that comes out of the South is absolutely beatable. I just don't think that's good football down there. But everything else is going to be bad there. You know what I mean? Like I said, anything else, I don't see them getting any further than that. And that means we'd have to go to Dallas.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, that's a problem. Dallas has played well at home. But I mean, that's another one of those, you guys know each other well. So I mean, it'll be a dogfight the whole time.
Exactly. So listen, we are at the top of the hour. I'm going to just run a quick little commercial for us here through the Northeast Streaming Sports Network. Hey, listen, if you guys are following us here, we are on Roku, so you can watch us on the big screen. I have a big screen right in front of me. I can't show you what's going on right there because I'd have to turn the camera all the way around, but I do have a big screen. You could watch us on the big screen in, live and in color. So definitely follow us on our Roku channel, the Northeast Streaming Sports, and we will be back momentarily. Once I get this all up. There we go.
I mean, you can see right now, without LeBron, Lakers are struggling.
Let me tell you about a team I hate, all right? I know the Dallas Cowboy fan is here, so I had to make sure he knew how much I hate this team.
I'm ready.
I've often said that the people who run baseball, they try very hard to ruin it.
I'm from Brooklyn. I don't have a problem saying it to his face. Oh, I'm from Brooklyn. Hey, you guys any?
Trisha's having a sleepover tonight. Can I go?
I wonder about Lucy's friends. What should I say? I know you're only 10, but one of these days a friend will offer you a drink. And alcohol at your age can lead to so many things. None of them good.
So can I go to the sleepover?
Lucy, I want you to promise me
I
something.
finished my homework.
Bigger promise. If there's any drinking, I want you to say, "No thanks, not my thing."
Mom.
I promise you. Your real friends won't care. Deal?
Sure.
Really?
I promise, Mom.
They really do hear you.
Did you pack your toothbrush?
For tips on how to start the talk, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov, a public service message from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.
This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
And welcome back to our new show, Coast to Coast, with Pags and Bo. We're sitting here. We're talking about the NFL. There was a lot to talk about, and we were both, I'm in the playoffs. He's not quite in the playoffs yet, but he's hoping that the Bears do their job this week and beat the Green Bay Packers so that they could sneak in. Last year, it wound up coming down to the fact that you guys beat Detroit by 1 point. And then Detroit did their job. So last year, you guys snuck in because Detroit beat the Packers. This year, you're hoping Chicago beats the Packers. So let's see if love in Green Bay is stronger than the Bears. So that being said, so we went over the AFC scenario. We didn't really go over the NFC too much because there's not really much to talk about. There are a few games that are a little bit surprising here. Everybody in the AFC South can still win that title.
Yeah.
The Falcons, the Saints, Tampa Bay, all in it and could, possibly be that number 4 seed. None of those teams can, I think, except maybe the Saints. The Saints with Seattle losing could possibly get in.
Yeah, they could sneak in. They need help, though. Like, it wouldn't just be Seattle. I think they have to have a couple teams lose, if I remember right. But even still, I think they're the only ones.
All right. Are you hearing some of that feedback?
No,
Okay, good. I just want to make sure that it's only me hearing it and not you guys. So, also, Tampa Bay could sneak in with a Seattle loss and a Green Bay loss. So, if both Seattle and Green Bay lose, Tampa Bay can sneak into the playoffs, and then you would have 2 teams from what would be considered really the worst division in football, the NFC South, make it into the playoffs because both Seattle and Green Bay couldn't do their job.
which seems crazy because that division has played so poorly. The fact that they could have 2 in the playoffs makes no sense.
Agreed. I think it's ridiculous. Truth of the matter is that I don't care who wins that division. I think that the Eagles, as the number 5 seed, because nobody's going to be able to outdo them to get that high, will wind up beating either one of those teams.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah. The Eagles are far and away better than any of the teams in that division. So, I think the only team that could make it interesting would be. I guess, it just depends on which Eagles show up, I guess. Right? Like.
Yeah, I mean, just because the only reason why I think the Saints more than any other team is because that building gets very loud. And as far as passionate fan bases get, the Saints have one. The Saints have a very passionate fan base, and they would be very loud for the playoffs.
Yeah, and I like their roster. Like, they're not coached well, but their roster is good enough to beat them. They're who I thought were going to win the division at the beginning of the season. Just when you look at the roster, you're like, oh, okay, here we go, right? You got a solid defense. You got a running back. You bring in some stability at quarterback. You're like, okay, this should be the thing. This is a scenario where I think if they don't win their division, like if it comes down to they're out of the playoffs or whatever, I think they do finally move on and they end up with another coach. Be one of the 10 teams looking at coaches this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of coaching vacancies, I think. The fact that Atlanta could still win as, again, if Tampa Bay loses, Atlanta beats the Saints, they would get in, and it would be kind of like last year where Tampa Bay got in with a less than 500 record. That's what would happen this year, as Atlanta would be the winner with an 8-9 record over both Tampa Bay and New Orleans. I think New Orleans actually wins this game. I think if the Saints do win, they're in. No, they need Tampa Bay to lose.
Yeah.
So
the Saints have to win, and I think that's probably how that'll play out. And mostly because I'm not a Baker believer. Right? Like, he is that guy that can, when he's on, you're like, oh wow, like, dude can play. The problem is he's not on very often, right? He's one of those guys that's really inconsistent. Makes me mad every week when I'm making picks, right? Because it doesn't seem to matter which I pick. It's probably going to be wrong. Just
exactly.
That's Baker for you.
So, and then ultimately, obviously, Detroit's won the division in the North, and Green Bay could make it in. I think Green Bay is a win and in, because it seems like everybody needs Green Bay to lose. So they could, and they have to at least win or tie, obviously. So with Green Bay Packers, with the win, they are in, and that's an automatic. The Vikings could get in with a win, a Green Bay loss, a Seattle loss, and a Tampa Bay loss, or a New Orleans loss. So that's how that works. Saints win,
so
and
Nick is in the my buddy Nick's in the comments here, right? Packers win and they're in. Yeah, they're gonna catch an L, buddy. Like,
yeah, and I can imagine that he's all excited about that. Hey, listen, the Packers were in last year. All they had to do was beat the Lions, who were resting their players for the fact that they were already on the golf course, and they didn't do it. And that was with Aaron Rodgers. Now you've got some Jordan Love going on. I don't know if he's going to show enough love to make it happen, but we'll see. We'll see, because Chicago is going to come, I think, to try to upset the Packers. And how, especially now that he, that no longer Rodgers is there. He doesn't own Chicago anymore because he's no longer there with Green Bay. I think they're going to go out of their way to try to prove a point, and beat the Packers, because they are playing in Chicago. It's the first time they're playing in Chicago since that game where he owned them, right?
Yep.
So I would absolutely feel the exact same way as they do. So the Eagles, interestingly enough, still have a chance to win the division with a Dallas loss against Washington, but I don't think that occurs. I think Dallas absolutely wins that game. So if we tie or lose, Dallas automatically wins it, but they're playing Washington. The one thing I will say is that Washington could go out with a little bit of a bang, because this is going to be Rivera's last game as a coach, I think, anywhere in the NFL. And Dallas isn't really playing their best football right now.
So it wouldn't be surprising to see that occur, but it wouldn't be the biggest surprise. But I just can't see it happening. I just can't see Dallas blowing this game here, especially with the division on the line and so much at stake because it's the number 2 seed. It is the number 2 seed on the line. I think that even if what would happen is if they lost the division, they would go to the number 5 seed, obviously, and the Eagles would get the number 3 seed. We wouldn't even be the number 2 seed anymore because we lost that game last week, and that was the telltale, I guess, in terms of who got that second because of the common opponents.
Yeah.
That all being said, who else is possibly in the mix here besides Seattle? Yeah, like I said,
the Rams are in.
The Rams are in. They did clinch a berth because being 9-7. Ultimately, again, that's why I don't think it's a big deal for this game. That game should be, it's going to be a 4 o'clock game because obviously it's a West Coast game, but it could be a 9 o'clock game over on your side of because it's not going to matter even a little bit. I think that you're going to see nobody playing that game.
I mean, the thing that could be interesting is if they finish where they are, I believe since the Lions, they are now third, right?
Which right now the Lions are the number 3 seed, correct?
Yeah. So that would have them playing the Rams first round, which means you'd have Stafford playing the Lions, Goff playing the Rams in the playoffs. So that'll be a fun storyline. They get to go back and beat each other up for their old teams.
Well, I don't think that could change even if a loss from either team. Short of
you're locked in.
Yeah, I think Detroit could move up to the number 2 spot. And it doesn't really explain it here in the NFL playoff scenarios on the fact that how Detroit would possibly move up or not.
The Cowboys would have to lose, and then the Eagles would have to lose. The Lions have to beat the Vikings. I believe they would be a game ahead at that point.
All three are tied. All three are tied at 11-5. So ultimately,
so you need the Eagles to win. You need the Cowboys to lose, and they have to beat the Vikings because they have the tiebreaker versus the Eagles, but not against the Cowboys. I think is how that works.
Well, and I don't know about that because now the common opponents changed because they lost to the Cowboys. So this is the hard part about this. So when you have this 17th game, there became a lot more different scenarios that occur. And because they lost, it's possible, I think, that the Eagles could wind up with the number 2 spot. I guess it depends because we did play the Vikings this year. So if Detroit absolutely has to beat the Vikings, and by beating them twice, even though we beat them once, I think that would create the common opponents victory. They would wind up with a little bit better percentage points. So ultimately, I think that the Eagles, if they were to win the division, I think only could get the number 3 spot. Again, short of Detroit losing and us just having the better record. But
I mean, if you look at it that way, if they got the number 2 and then somehow Seattle sneaks in, that's the scenario the Lions don't want, right? For whatever reason, the Seahawks find ways to beat the Lions. So in this scenario, they want the Rams over the Hawks, even though the Rams are playing better football for whatever reason. Yeah,
but the Lions wouldn't play. Well, I mean, I guess it depends. It depends on. You're right. So if the Seahawks do sneak in as the number 7 seed and Detroit's got the number 2 seed, you're stuck playing with them. Yeah. So exactly. That's why. I mean, I guess at that point you got a 1 o'clock game too on Sunday. Do you not?
I believe it is a 1 o'clock. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's the hard part about that is that watching some of these Saturday games, like we didn't even know that it was a Sunday game for us until yesterday when they decided to finally say, yeah, we're going to play on Sunday and not Saturday. These TBD games really stink. I'm not a fan of them, not even a little bit. But ultimately, we'll be able to see kind of what's occurring and how things are going to happen from here on out. But it's there's a lot. There's a lot that's going on, and we'll be able to get all back to it. Obviously, on Saturday when it starts. I think the Saturday 4 o'clock game, right, is the Steelers, right? So we're going to know right off the bat who's going to be in. As I go that to my schedule for Saturday's games.
Let's see, we got
Steelers, Ravens at 4:30, which makes sense because I don't think anybody's going to play for the Ravens, and then the Texans and the Colts at 8:15.
that'll be a good game.
That is going to be a good game. I like how they have that on the Saturday because
Absolutely.
ultimately you need to be able to know what's going to happen for Sunday when that game goes on because they want to make that a 4 o'clock game. I'm sure that's going to be the CBS game of the week for them. If for I guess Jacksonville, they play Tennessee. I know it's Sunday at 1 o'clock on CBS, so you're going to know that division is going to be covered in total at that point.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because I'm seeing the 8 o'clock games. And
they have a lot in the early block.
Say again?
They actually have a lot in the early block on Sunday.
Yeah, because they want it to be resolved at that point. They want to know what's really going to occur when it comes to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wrapping it up. Bills and Dolphins that night though is going to be amazing. Like that game should be fireworks.
It's a shame that I got a 4 o'clock game. My game is at 4:15, so I'm going to have to watch that via my phone.
Oh, I got you.
Because I'll be on a bus on the way back, I think.
Yeah, well, so ours is also 4 o'clock East Coast. You said 1 o'clock, and it is 1 o'clock for us.
I know it's definitely a 4 o'clock game. It's definitely a 4 o'clock game for us here. So. Which is 1 o'clock your time. But either way, it won't matter because, like I says, I'm not going to be able to watch a lot of that game until I get back into town, and so I'll have to be following it on my phone, which isn't so bad. I'll let everybody else know on the bus on what's going on. So, we spoke a lot about football. There are some other sports that are going on, and I want to ask you, since you're out in Seattle, and I thought the Mariners. I'm going to go to baseball here a little bit, even though because we can't talk basketball yet. Because although I did hear some news that we could maybe talk about towards the end here. But I thought that there was a really good chance that Ohtani was going to go to Seattle. Because I know that there's a huge Asian contingent up there that I thought that would be something worthwhile for him to do, and that Seattle was kind of looking to maybe spend some money. Get somebody to help J-Rod.
Money though, they're never looking to spend that money. That for whatever reason, the Mariners are really happy being the league's AAA team. I don't know what it is. They develop talent. And then they ship them other places to win rings. If you're a fan of the Mariners, it is really frustrating. But there was a lot of rumors surrounding him coming. But I knew he was going to get a price tag that was crazy, and there was no way the Mariners were going to spend that. Now, obviously, I didn't see the contract that he did get. $700 million is absolutely insane. But especially for a guy that we're not entirely sure he's going to be able to pitch again. Right, this is his second Tommy John, and then so you're telling me you got a 10-year, $700 million, or potentially a DH.
Right.
That is absolutely insane to me. Like that is in my mind horrible money management. And even if you say best case scenario, he comes back. Right, he's a starter for what, another 2-3 years, maybe get another 2 or 3 as a reliever. So once his contract really starts to pay out, he's still a DH at best. If he's
he can't ever pitch as a reliever. He would never be able to pitch as a reliever because he's a DH. He's a DH. It wouldn't work.
Oh, that's true.
Him in the bullpen.
True. Yeah, I didn't think about that. He'd have to come in. That would have to be like you use him as a closer, right? So maybe.
Well,
so if you were an away game, he'd be able to bat and then come and close out, right?
Yeah, but how do you warm up? Like, how would you warm up for that? Like that, you wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, that's true.
Ultimately, you would have to pinch hit for him to go give him the opportunity to go warm up, and that would be the only scenario that would even possibly occur. Ultimately, you got to have him as a starter. You'd have to have him as a starter, and if you can't have him as a starter, you don't have him pitching at all, unless he's not playing. Unless he's not playing at all.
True, but I mean, in that scenario, you either lose a batter, or, I mean, I don't think you'll pitch at a high level for a couple of years after 2 surgeries, right? Like, it just doesn't seem like that's going to be a real thing. So the money doesn't make sense for what he is, outside of he will absolutely fill your stadium.
Well, to a certain extent, I think that's part of it. Obviously, it's like I was excited to see him when he came here to Philly the first time. The second time he came here, he didn't play. And seeing him and Mike Trout on the field together, back to back at bat, was fun to watch. And to see the hoopla. I mean, obviously, I'm somebody who gets painted up for those games too. So I got interviewed by Japanese baseball. You know what I mean? So it's like, because they're not used to seeing anybody like me. You know what I mean? Hey, got my face painted up and I'm at a baseball game in the middle of summer. They're like, there's not many face painters that go to baseball games. So the fact that there is this guy who's walking around the stadium and taking pictures with everybody, they got an interview with me. And I heard that I'm big in Japan, but that they like that type of thing, that they do that a little bit more frequently over on that side in that league, that there are more face painters and there are more people that get overly excited for games there. I don't know if they're face painters, but they're costume wearers. You know what I mean? That they go all out for that. So it was something unique for Major League Baseball, because obviously they're following him around everywhere. You know what I mean? That's, he is a national treasure to all the Japanese. And now they got 2 players. They spent $1 billion on Japanese players. And really more than $1 billion, because not only are you paying $325 million for the pitcher, but you have to pay, I think it's like a sliding scale. Like it's 10% for the first 10 million, and then it's like 15% up to 25 million, and then it's like 20% from there on out of the contract. So, once you get up to like $50 million or whatever, it's, you're paying some money just to have him come over.
Yeah, no, that's well. I mean, when you think of the Dodgers payroll at this point, because they have Mookie Betts on there too, right? So between 3 players, they have $1.3 billion worth of contracts. Like, they better win a ring, or else they look like they're really dumb otherwise.
Yeah, and I look at them as like, I just don't see it. They still don't have enough. Like when you get knocked out of the playoffs in the first round, it shows that there is something big missing. Now, hot teams get hot at the right times, but to have that happen 2 years in a row, to run into a wild card team and lose, and to run into a wild card team and lose. Now we lost obviously to Arizona, and Arizona made it to the World Series, and of course, wasn't able to keep it going. And I feel like, honestly, I feel like MLB did a few things similar to what the NFL does with their umpires. I feel like that they tried to extend some of these games by just shrinking and enlarging strike zones. It's like one of those situations that was just really funny to watch when you're seeing it. Like, and I saw it start to occur firsthand. Like all of a sudden, the strike zone got bigger for Diamondback pitchers. Like it was just like, but they're not calling it consistently for the Phillies pitchers either. And I think that was done just to try to get the games to Game 6 and Game 7, just knowing that, hey, there's no chance that Philadelphia loses both games at home in
Yeah.
in the NLCS. And guess what happened? They lost
Yep.
both games at home. And it is what it is. You know what I mean? We lost, and that was that. You know what I mean? They won it, and of course, then Texas Rangers wind up winning their first World Series.
Yeah.
I kind of thought, and it's a shame because didn't you have your final series of the regular season against the Rangers in Seattle, or was it against Houston?
Our final one, I want to say, actually was against the Rangers. Yeah.
And you guys lost. I think you guys got swept out.
Yeah,
and that's how the Rangers wound up winning the division.
Right. I think we played Houston and then the Rangers to end the season. And then,
yeah, because you guys were in the mix for even to win the division. I think, or definitely make a wild card run, and you guys just didn't do it.
No, so that's something where they were kind of a long shot to do it anyway, because when you looked at the year before, they get into the playoffs, right? They, after 21 years, they finally get in. They take down Toronto, and then they gave Houston everything they could handle, right? So then you get into the offseason, and they were the only team in our division to not do anything to noticeably get better, right? The Angels got better. The Rangers got better. Houston didn't really get better, but they were the better team in the division anyway, right? And so you're looking at this and you're just like, okay, well, we kind of stayed where we were and everyone else added pieces to get better. And you saw that throughout the season. There were games that we were winning the year before that now we were dropping, especially within our division, against teams that you're like, oh, that piece they added, they used that piece to beat us in this game. And so as you were getting close to the end of the season, were they still there? Sure. But there's a lot of seasons they've been close and, they just can't get it done. And then you look at this offseason, they dump a bunch of pieces because you're like, oh, okay, maybe they're trying to clear some space to bring Ohtani in. Maybe we're finally going to do something. And Ohtani gets signed and then they don't sign anybody. So now, based on where the Mariners are today, they are real likely going to be the last team in our division.
Come on, Oakland's still going to stink. Or Las Vegas, or wherever they go.
Yeah, wherever they're going to play. It's funny, though, because of the things that they've got rid of, it might be close. But no, you're not wrong. No, they'll be better than Oakland. But they're not going to be in real contention.
No, and it's a shame because I think about that. There was 2 games specifically that I remember of that series against Houston 2 years ago. Was, after having those every extra inning game, the man on second base to play an 18-inning game made me feel like that was real baseball. You know what I mean? And that was just amazing to kind of watch. And then I remember the manager making a pitching change at the wrong time. And I said, this is a mistake. Do not take him out. And they took him out. And I think the next batter was, just rocked one. And that was the end. And that was the end of the series. And it was like such a shame because I thought that all you guys needed was one win. One win to kind of get under their skin a little bit and to make them a little nervous. They just beat the Yankees. They swept the Yankees, or they played you guys first and then they swept the Yankees, because ultimately that 18 inning game was a tough game to lose, but showed them that you guys were in it. And then that next game is where you guys got beat. It was like, I'm like, that was not what should have happened there. You should not have pulled that guy. And it was frustrating to watch. And then they wind up winning the World Series against us. I feel like that ball that what's his face hit is still flying out there. They said it was 450 foot home run. I know because I saw it firsthand. I was every bit of 500 plus feet. Every bit of 500 plus feet.
That thing was rocked. There's no doubt.
Yeah, and that was in the 6th inning, and there was just like, all right, that's a shame. And having to be there, watching everybody in Houston celebrate. I mean, Houston was the better team, and we were riding on a high to try to get there. And ultimately, just didn't do it. So we'll try to be back this year. Obviously, I mean, we have a lot of pieces that are there, and hopefully they can gel a little bit better and a little bit faster than they did. But I still don't believe that LA is guaranteed the ring now. There's nothing that tells me that LA is guaranteed the ring. And there's been a few Japanese pitchers that have come over here that have done well, and there's been a few that have not done well. So I'll be interested to see how that guy plays out. The fact that there's a couple of Japanese players on the same team makes me think it might be a little bit easier for them. But ultimately, I just don't think that the Dodgers are the team.
I don't think it guarantees them a ring for sure. No, my only thing is they better win one with the amount of money they're spending.
Right. Yeah, you're just about you're like Wayne Izenga. When he owned the Marlins, you're trying to buy a World Series, and he was able to. He was able to buy the World Series.
I'm thinking of the 90s Yankees, right? Outspend everybody, go collect rings.
Yep. And, we'll see. You see how well it worked for the Mets this year.
I mean, it's the Mets. Like
the one thing that you're 100% certain of is that they're going to Mets it up.
Yeah,
I love saying that all the time, especially to Mets fans, because they have to agree with me most of the time. Yep. So,
and it's funny because even when I say something like that and it's Mets fans, they're like, "Hey," and I'm like, "I'm a Mariners fan. Calm down." Like,
exactly.
You guys at least have a trophy in the case.
But so there was something else that happened yesterday. That I want to know how much. You even paid attention to it because you guys did win, but it was the first ever West Coast Winter Classic. I think it was outside, right? They did play this outside, correct?
Yeah, so it was in T-Mobile Park. So they played it in the stadium the Mariners play in. So they built the ice arena there, and so it's our first Winter Classic, and I mean that was really cool. Obviously, it was going to be the first one because we've only had a team. This is our third year. Right. So it's not like they've been around a long time, but very cool that they brought that to Seattle. Obviously it's better that the Kraken get the win. So, that's a huge bonus, but I mean, it's cool. It's unfortunate the Kraken are off to a little bit slower season than they were last year, but it's been fun to watch. It's been awesome to have the NHL here in Seattle.
Are you a hockey fan at all?
Yeah, so I am. I like hockey. I don't follow it the way I follow football, obviously, but it's fun to watch. I'm not an over the top hockey fan, I guess.
So I will tell you this: I bled orange and black before I ever bled green. I learned how to become a fan through watching hockey. So I am a very big hockey fan. I know a lot about your coach, Dave Hackstall, and was not a big fan of him here. He was able to learn certain things, and I felt like he did have your team playing over and above where they should have last year. I didn't think that they were as good as their record indicated, which that's a coaching thing when he's got all the cogs moving in the right direction and everything seems to be moving forward and everybody buys in is great. Ultimately, I don't think that he has the same mojo as he did from last year, which is the reason why you're not doing so well this year around. But I like Seattle in general, especially that I was just up there for the game. And I got to, I was up there for an extra day because, the NFL did us such a great favor by moving the game to Monday night for the first time ever. Because they know Eagles fans will travel and won't care. So we got to spend an extra day in Seattle and such. So just knowing Seattle fans and the Seattle Seahawks fan base is actually a great fan base. I know a lot of them and know a lot of the Seahawk groups that aren't in Seattle. There are numerous Seahawks groups, a number of them in Florida and on the East Coast and in Oklahoma and things like that. And I'm very close with a number of super fans So when I go to the drafts, I spend a lot of time in the Seattle area, like the Seattle Seahawks group, because I do know a lot of them, and they are a fun group and very respectful, and they know a lot about their football. And it's for a franchise that's relatively young. They started out in 1976. They are very astute football people. And a few years ago when I had COVID, the reason why I'm so close with them, a few years when I had COVID, uh, I had more people reach out to me from the Seahawks fan base than I did any other fan base, including my own, and even mothers of the players were
Oh, cool.
reaching out to me, which was really cool. So, like, I have they like to give all their Seahawks super fans names. You got the different Hawks, like I got Mega Hawk that I'm friends with, and T Hawk, and all this other stuff. When I went to the Pro Bowl in Orlando, I went with the Seahawk group, and
Oh,
I was given the honorary Eagle Hawk, because I was the bird in the wrong nest for that situation. So, which was kind of cool. You know what I mean? So it's like I have a really strong love for that fan base, and not necessarily the team, but the fan base, absolutely. So, and I like to root for fans. But that being said, while I was up there in Seattle, there was some conversation, and it looked like it may happen. I don't know if it's next year or the following year, but the Supersonics maybe coming back to Seattle.
Yeah. So it's funny because the NBA really wants a team in Vegas, right? And if they're going to do an expansion, they got to bring in two. And there's been a lot of pressure from not just outside the NBA, but now there's some within the NBA to get a team back in Seattle. So I think this is going to be one of those where the TV contract comes up at the end of 25, and that's when you would do your expansion, right? Because then you get to bring in more money by, hey, we're going to have two more teams. We're going to have all these more games. So they're going to be able to leverage that expansion into more dollars from TV networks. And I think that is when you see the Sonics come back. And of course, Vegas gets a team.
Right. Well, and, I know that everybody's trying to get teams in Vegas right now. So that franchise is going to be worth really a lot of money. And it's a shame because the only thing that I remember about the Seattle Supersonics is Kemp, and obviously he's still got a big presence out in Seattle, because I think he's now doing everything green, the way that he's doing things legally green this time around. So but ultimately, Seattle was a good team back then. The Supersonics were like one of those teams that you were nervous about because he was such a good player. So it's interesting. I'm glad to see Seattle become really like a four sports city. You know what I mean? And I think that's important there. They also, not, and I won't even talk about soccer, because the Sounders have beaten the Union for a couple of cups. Like the U.S. Cup and stuff like that. The Sounders have beaten us. So Seattle's soccer is actually done pretty well over the years. Not in the last couple of years. They haven't really, lived up to the billing. But there is some type of rivalry with Seattle and Philadelphia when it comes to the MLS.
Well, and it's funny because a lot of people don't even realize that there is a rugby league, but we have the Seawolves here, and they've won a couple of championships as well. So sports is big in Seattle. People don't really think about it, but when you go to games here, it's not just when you go to a Hawks game. Like, the atmosphere is electric. This area likes sports.
Yes, and I was talking, obviously, when I was at the game. They were saying specifically that there must be a lot of Eagles fans here because we can't get it up above 105. They couldn't get the stadium above 105, which is funny because they use the same thing that I use. I actually have, I consider myself the loudest fan in the NFL, and I have the same meter to to show that and share that with people. Here, I'm gonna actually pull it out because I actually have it in my camera resting on it. Excuse me one sec. Let's get that right. But this is exactly. I'll show. That's not going to show well. But that's there we go. That's the same one that they use at the stadium.
All right.
The exact same one. And I'm like, how about that? That's kind of cool that I have the same thing that they use. And so I know at least it works well.
True.
But ultimately we had enough people there that we made it quiet, which was good for us, I guess. Not so good to win the game, but good enough to keep it quieter.
I mean, it's helpful because it means you got less false starts than you probably otherwise would have had.
Well, we don't know about that because we get a lot of false starts anyways. Yeah, we always have our guys going a little bit earlier than they're supposed to. So
you got to make that push work, right?
Exactly. So, but ultimately, it's there's a lot going on in Seattle, and like I said, I guess it's in 25 is when you guys are going to have that basketball team back.
And it looks like it, and then of course, kind of going back to football a little bit is you have the merging of the XFL and the USFL, and we do have one of those teams, and then you also have the return of the AFL. The AFL is supposed to come back this year. So arena football is supposed to find its way back, which is crazy. But the XFL, USFL, that'll be interesting to see how they get those two leagues to merge. Now it's going to be the UFL on it. So that's going to be kind of cool to see if they can get a spring league to finally work.
Well, I think that was the problem, that they saw that there was too much football in the spring. I ultimately in the USFL, the Stars were released. They are no longer going to be a team, which I was like, all right, it didn't really matter much to me, only because they didn't play here in Philly. It's like ultimately
that was the weird thing about it, right? They only played in 2 cities, right?
Correct. Actually, I think it was 4 for the last season. It was 4 cities for the last season, but
that's right. Yeah, that's right.
But I mean, I liked it better when it was Joel and Birmingham, because at least there everybody did it and it made most sense. And then they played the Super Bowl or the USFL Bowl or the American Bowl, whatever it was, in Canton, Ohio. So that would have been that made sense to me, because I went out to Canton, Ohio for the first USFL Super Bowl, and of course we lost that game, but it was fun to be at just because it's football, Mountain, the Hall of Fame, and 4th of July, we're playing some football, and it was fun. But they just didn't do well enough to market, I think, properly. And having The Rock as the guy who's kind of running, the XFL, I don't know that he's the right guy either, but it made more sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's a marketing machine, right? So whether he's good at running the thing, who knows? But from a marketing standpoint, it makes all the sense in the world to have him as your spokes guy. But, seeing how these 2 leagues are coming together, that's going to be interesting to see how it is that works. You had to know that the USFL was going to dump some teams since they didn't all have their own stadiums. But yeah, I don't know. I'll watch. I'll put it that way. I'll watch. I'm interested to see how this works more than anything because, I mean, one, I just love football, and so more football is good. But also, because I want to see college kids have another chance, right? Like, say you went to a school where you didn't get that opportunity. Well, now you do have sort of that lower league opportunity that hasn't been there in quite a while. And when it was there the first time, it wasn't really, right? Like it wasn't really kind of viewed the same. The NFL actively tried to crush it. And this time around, the NFL really looks like they want it as a developmental league where they can also try out some rules, things like that. Like one of the things that, we briefly touched on at the beginning of the show is I liked when the AAF was there. They had that one season, then of course, they went bankrupt and COVID came and all of that, right? but they had a couple of things that were kind of cool about it. And one of those was the ref in the sky. Right. And there's elements of that it would be amazing, because there's calls that are blatant that, get missed, or on the other end, they get called and you're like, yeah, I mean, that kind of wasn't really a call though. So some of those having the ability to get overturned would be kind of cool, especially if it's in a game-changing situation. So I think the NFL is kind of embracing this lower level league, whereas when they were around the first time, the NFL was still trying to grow and they were just trying to crush everything.
Right. Well, no, and I understand that. And the other thing I think about this is that when they start, they have 15 men on the practice squad now. And I don't think they like having 15 guys on the practice squad. I think they want to lessen that, but they got to be able to pull other guys from different locations. So when teams can take any, the Eagles could take anybody from the Seahawks practice squad.
Sure.
But ultimately it's not really the best to be able to do that. They want to be able to have those teams want to have control of the players on their practice squad. They don't want to lose somebody off of their practice squad that somebody else could just take automatically. So I think that's what's going to happen. They're going to bring the practice squad down to about another 5 guys, not 15. And then ultimately that's where your other pool is going to be at, that you're going to be able to see these guys play, and they're going to be able to play. They can go from, spring ball or XFL or UFL or whatever it's going to be to now you could play in the arena league, and just so that you can stay sharp and be able to take from those guys. Like, oh, somebody's having a killer season over in the, arena league. Let's give him a shot since we have 3 guys hurt on our roster. So, and those are things that I think the NFL really likes about Major League Baseball and with hockey, that they have these smaller leagues that they're able to pull people up from, and that NFL doesn't have that. Like, there's not a lot of unsigned free agents. That come, and once you get out of college, you can go do a walk-on tryout. Excuse me, if you're good enough to try to do that. But after that, you're stuck. You know what I mean? If you didn't make it that year, then you ain't making it on a team. You're not going to be able to walk on after the team's already figured out their rosters and such. So you're stuck not playing football, and you better remain in shape and things like that. And it's not the easiest thing in the world to do.
No, and you can't simulate game speed any other way than playing games anyway. So had you been out of the league a couple of years, you get out of college, you don't land somewhere. If you're not taking real-time reps, I don't care how good a shape you are, you're not game speed.
Right. James doesn't seem to think that way. James likes to think that I don't know what it is that I'm talking about, but I actually do know what I'm talking about, James. And obviously, you could say whatever you want, but I'm the one doing the show and you're not. So, but good work here. Good work. So any thoughts on you? Like, have you considered becoming a coach? Obviously you've been in the league, a little bit how the league works. How come you haven't decided to go that route?
So it's funny when I walked away, it was one of those, I knew I wouldn't be able to separate my want to lace those cleats back up. Wow.
I got haters all over the place. Don't worry about that. The haters are just jealous is really what it is. So,
I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't have haters, it means you haven't done anything, right? So right. I always embrace them. But, again, at the end of the day, I just knew that I was going to have a hard time not wanting to, put the cleats back on. And so it was one of those, it's like, no, I kind of don't want to do that. As I get older, now, obviously, I can't physically do any of that anymore anyway. I would entertain it, but I'm enjoying this a lot more.
Oh, and that's good. I never got into, playing college football. I did play like some rough touch, later, with the Navy and such. They always have those intramural leagues and such.
Oh, sure.
But never really, never really did anything beyond that. Just rather be a fan and kind of watch that. And truth of the matter is that being a coach in any level of football, whether it be even the peewees going all the way up into high school and college and then in the pros, is difficult, is a challenge. So I'm definitely it's easier for me to be a Monday morning quarterback. And just like I said, I just care about my team. You know what I mean? I want to see our team do better. I don't really talk bad about other teams, although everybody likes to think that I do. By talking good about my team, I'm talking bad.
Uh-oh. Well, looks like he froze up.
There we go. Now we're back. Sorry about that. But anyways, like I said, I love being the fan and being a fan of other fans.
Oh yeah,
that's
for
the important part. That's what I enjoy most of anything else.
Yeah, so. And it's fun, especially when you get interactive. I love, like, when I go to a Hawks game, a lot of times I try and sit where the other fans are going to be, right? And because I want to sit there and I want to talk, right? Because it's fun. Like the rest of the week, I have to be an analyst and like take what I do seriously. But for 3 hours when I'm sitting in the seat at the game, I'm not that guy. Like I'm going to chat and, but it's one of those where, like, I remember it was years ago now, we played the Cardinals, and before the game, me and this Cardinals fan, we're just chirping back and forth, having a good time. And, I think it was like the end of the first quarter, we're up by like 28. And so I end up just sending him a beer. I'm like, sorry, buddy. Like, there's a lot of time left. And, at the same time, I did that one year. We were off to a good start. We had a 3-1 on the season, and the Saints came to town. They were 0-4, right? And I'm like, you guys are about to be 0-5, and we're chatting back and forth. And then they came and just smacked us. Like, so it goes both ways. But it's fun, right? Like, you go back and forth with other fan bases at the game. It's a blast. And then, but the rest of the week, this is what I do.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the same way with me. I like to banter back and forth. It's all about having fans. If we all like the same team, we'd have nothing to talk about.
True.
So I love the banter back and forth. And, like I said, even James, when he's sitting there saying, trying to, razz me up some. Hey, James, I appreciate you watching. That's all I care about. If you want to tune into me, you want to be a hater, you can be a hater all you want. So I appreciate it. Thanks for coming in and paying attention for a little while. But that being said, one of the things that I want to do is, like, on a couple days during the week, we should bring on different people. We'll send the link out so that they can call in or log in, give us some of their feedback on things that are going on. Obviously, this is a brand new show, so we're doing things a little bit, off the cuff here. This is our first time actually talking to each other about sports and such beyond, a couple of phone calls. So it's definitely something that is going to get better as we move forward. And then, James, as much as a hater you can be, we will have you come on. And then you could tell me kind of face to face how much of a hater you are to me and why you don't like anything that I do. But I love hearing about it. But in the meantime, we are just about up and out of time, so we will be back on again tomorrow. We get a full-fledged another version of the Coast to Coast. And we're going to have McLovin on with us. He's a Dallas Cowboys fan. So if you are, for all of them Dallas fans out there, you'll have somebody on your side to, yell and scream that was the correct call and that there was no chance that the Lions should have won that game and all that other fun stuff, which we all know is for real. But anyways, because I know that I hate the Cowboys, and it sounds like you also feel similar way about the Cowboys. But
they're just funny to me because they're always like, oh, this is our year and whatever. It's like, it always made me laugh when it was like Jason Garrett. It's like, yeah, it's your year. You're going to go 8-8. Just calm down. It's fine. just clap, call it a day.
Nope, they can't. So they can't do it like that.
I will say this, though. Their dedication to buying new jerseys is second to none because they have one bad game. Them things are on fire. And then the next week, they're in a new jersey again. So, I mean, they spend money like nothing else.
Hey, listen, good God bless them. You know what I mean? Somebody's got to spend the money on those things. But, it's funny how there's never been it's been a long time since there's been a Dallas Cowboy who has led the league in jersey sales. So it's been a while. I think the last one was maybe Micah Parsons for a few minutes. But that was it. So anyways, everybody, thank you very much for coming on. We did have a number of viewers and such like that. So we'll be here every day, Monday through Friday from 12 to 2. So definitely come back and check us out again. Like I said, tomorrow we will have McLovin and we will talk some more about what's going on in the world of sports. But thank you very much, and we will take care. Have a great day.
Take it easy, guys.